As you can see, this is the recording of Revelation chapter 17, and the slide you're looking at is the woman rides the beast. We'll find out the woman is the harlot, mystery, mother of abominations, mother of harlots. Revelation 17 takes us back in time. If you remember, we finished chapter 16 with the seventh bowl, and of course the seventh bowl, there's a message, a loud voice out of the temple says, "It is done." And that would represent the final judgment of God on a rebellious earth and the end of time, really, as we know it, and it would signal the return of Jesus Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, which we see in chapter 19. So Revelation 17 takes us, sets the clock back a bit, and we go back in time to see how this destruction of Babylon, which is mentioned right at the end of chapter 16, we're going to see here in chapter 17 how that took place. And just an overview, the chapter 17 shows the dismantling, the destruction of the worldwide false religious system put in place. The beast from the sea, the Antichrist, used that religious system to consolidate his power. And when he was finished consolidating his power, he no longer needed that religious system, so he abolished it, destroyed it, and set himself up as an object of worship. We saw that in chapter 13, the so-called abomination of desolation. So here in chapter 17, we're going to discover how that happened. A lot of symbols in chapter 17, so we're going to take the view from 35,000 feet. We're not going to do a low level on this one. Low level flight, we can see houses and cars and people. 35,000 feet, we're just going to make out the main features of the geography below us. So, just a quick review. Chapters 10 through 14 represented a interlude, a rather long interlude. Chapter 10 was a big angel and the little scroll. John is told to eat the scroll, and he is recommissioned. His calling is expanded and continued. Chapter 11, John measures the temple, and then we meet two witnesses that prophesy for 3.5 years in Jerusalem. And we saw that most likely they are prophesying in the second half of the tribulation, known as the Great Tribulation, the last 3.5 years. And chapter 12 was the woman, the child, and the dragon. We had the woman giving birth, the dragon being there to devour the child. He is unsuccessful. The child ascends to heaven. The dragon goes to war in heaven and is ejected. Comes down to earth in a fury, chases the woman. She escapes, and so he chases her offspring, which at the end of chapter 12, they are characterized as those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. A rather fitting description of neatly knitting together the Old Covenant, the commandments of God, and the New Covenant, the testimony of Jesus Christ. And then we move into chapter 13, where we have the dragon, the beast from the sea, and the beast from the land, and the beast from the sea being the Antichrist, the beast from the land being the false prophet. And we are introduced to them and their schemes in chapter 13. And then in chapter 14, a busy chapter begins with the Lamb and the 144,000 on Mount Zion. There's 3 angels with 3 messages. The first message is the everlasting gospel. The second message is Babylon is fallen, is fallen. And the third message is a warning to those who have the mark of the beast and who do not respond to the first angel's commands to fear God and give glory to him. So that's the 3 angels with 3 messages. And then we have the chapter closing in chapter 14 with 2 sickles. One is in the right hand of the one like the Son of Man who comes on a cloud and, by all appearances, gathers the tares together to be burned. The second sickle in the hand of an angel who harvests the grapes which are cast into the winepress, and the blood is up to the horses' bridles. Quick recap. Chapter 15 and 16. 15 sets up the 7 bowl judgments which are poured out in chapter 16. The sense there is that they happen in quick succession and that we are very rapidly approaching the end of the Great Tribulation, which would put us right about here in the timeline, just before the return of Jesus Christ. And then we looked at just kind of an overlay of the seal judgments, which could possibly stretch out over the whole 7 years, and then the trumpet judgments, which seem compressed in the Great Tribulation period, and then the bowl judgments, which apparently are at the very end of that Great Tribulation period. We look quickly at the correspondence between the trumpet and the bowl judgments. I'm not going to go into any detail there, except to say that it would appear that the bowl judgments are an intensification, a rapid intensification of those trumpet judgments. And here's a picture of Nebuchadnezzar's vision in Daniel chapter 2, the stone cut out without hands, striking that statue on its feet. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at the destruction of Babylon. And this statue representing the world powers and those final world powers that are arrayed against the Lord in the feet of clay mixed with iron and the 10 toes. And so Nebuchadnezzar's dream we find in Daniel chapter 2, and Daniel's version of the dream we find in Daniel chapter 7. So that brings us to chapter 17, the woman rides the beast, and we're going to see that we need to actually step back in time in order to see how this religious system is dismantled. So let's quickly go through it. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with John. "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." First of all, notice the judgment of the great harlot. It's what we're about to look at. And if the 7th bowl, it is done, brought everything to an end, then indeed we are stepping back in time, resetting the clock a little earlier to see how this happens. Now the harlot rides the beast, but it also, so we see here, she sits on many waters. We'll talk about that later. And the inhabitants of the earth made drunk with her. In other words, they were intoxicated. They really enjoyed what they were doing at her behest. So off to the wilderness John goes, a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, now full of the names of blasphemy, 7 heads and 10 horns. Very detailed description of the beast out of the sea in chapter 13, which we call the Antichrist. And then she sits on many waters as well. So she sits on many waters. She sits on the beast, the scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And then a little bit later, we're going to see that she actually sits on 7 hills. So this woman has the privilege of controlling quite a bit. The fact that she's sitting on these hills and on the beast and on many waters infers that she is in control of those particular features, and we'll unpack that here in just a minute. So she was sitting on a scarlet beast, full of names of blasphemy, 7 head, 10 horns. The woman herself appears to be very, very wealthy. Purple was an extremely expensive color. Scarlet was the color of royalty, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. So very, very wealthy religious system. And in her hand was a golden cup, more wealth, full of the abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. She had a name on her forehead, and this was quite common in that day with that prostitutes and harlots sometimes would have something on their head, like a piece of jewelry that had their name on it. So this woman riding the beast, she has a name on her forehead. And what is it? Well, it's mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and the mother of the abominations of the earth. She is being characterized as the source of harlotry, which is false religion that's set up against Yahweh and the God of Israel. And the mother of the abominations of the earth, abominations being those things that particularly cause a stench in God's nostrils, although we could safely say that every and any sin does that. But here this mystery is no longer a mystery. This woman is the source of the rebellion against God and the religion that's set up to minimize the true religion, the true and living God. She's drunk with the blood of the saints. That means that she attacks not just the living God, but she also attacks those who follow him. And drunk with the blood of the saints means that she just really, really enjoys persecuting and killing, spilling the blood of these saints, particularly, bloodthirsty, to use the term, religious system. And John marveled with amazement. But the angel said, "Well, John, why do you marvel? I'll tell you the mystery. The beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit." And here's the bottom line: he's going to go to perdition. Was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit. There's a reference to the mortal wound that was apparently healed. And what that's going to do is give him a following among those who dwell on the earth, all those who have not bent the knee and bowed and received God's gift of salvation through Jesus Christ. These are the ones who have not received the everlasting gospel, but are rebellious to the bitter end. Those who dwell on the earth, the code for the unsaved, they're going to marvel when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. And what's the key factor about them? Their names are not written in the book of life. They've made the decision, whether they're aware of it or not, to take the escalator down on the left side. They've chosen that particular eternal destiny. They probably aren't aware of it. Maybe they are, but even not doing anything by default, it's that down escalator in this picture. So here's the mind that has wisdom. We saw that at the end of chapter 13 when the angel began to discuss, or when John saw the mark of the beast. Here is the mark. Here is the mind that has wisdom. Here is wisdom, I think is the way it read in chapter 13. So here's wisdom again, and anybody that is following the Lamb and being obedient to fearing God and giving glory to him, he can read this, he can hear this, and he can receive that wisdom. Those who dwell on the earth can't receive this wisdom. They've got a debased mind, according to Romans chapter 2. 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Lots of speculation on that. Let's just go on to the next line. There are also 7 kings. So it would appear the 7 mountains are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. There's a whole lot of different ways to interpret this, but basically it's a series of kingships that numbers a total of 8. 5 have fallen, 1 is, as John is looking at this. The other is not yet come, and number 7, so number 5 have fallen, 1 is, that's number 6. Number 7, when he comes, he'll continue a short time. And then we discover that the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth. So the Antichrist is the eighth king, and he's going to, for a short time, rule the earth. He's of the seven, so he's derived his power and authority from the seven. But again, we see that he's going to perdition. He is of the seven. He's related somehow to the seven. And again, the key fact, his destiny is perdition. We'll see that in chapter 19, right at the end. And the 10 horns. So we got this beast with 7 heads, 7 mountains, 7 kings, and 10 horns. 10 horns are 10 kings, but they have not received authority, they have not received a kingdom, and they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast, and they pass that authority on to the beast, and we'll see what they do in just a minute here. So, a little bit complicated. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 hills are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is. Number 6, the other is not yet come. Number 7, he's going to be here but a short time. And then number 8, the Antichrist, is of the 7 and is going to perdition. The 10 horns on those 7 heads are 10 kings who do not receive a kingdom. They kind of figurehead kings, maybe. They don't actually rule any territory, but they do have authority, and they give it to the beast, the Antichrist. And these will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And those who are with them are called chosen and faithful. So we know the outcome. We're given the outcome over here. The Lamb is going to overcome them. But they're deluded. They're going to make war with the Lamb anyway, not realizing that he is the King of kings and Lord of lords, and there's any resistance is futile. So let's look at this called, chosen, and faithful for a little bit. Those who are with him. With him. It just, to me, it begs the question, am I with him? Am I with him? His name is Emmanuel, God with us. He wants to be with us. The question is, am I with him? What does that mean, with him? I think of Amos chapter 3, verse 3, can 2 walk together unless they are agreed? And basically, for me to be with Jesus, I have to agree with everything that he says, everything that he commands, everything that he says about me, and everything that he says about himself. Am I with him? A good question for today. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Remember that characterization of the 144,000 in chapter 14? They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So if I'm with him where Jesus leads, I will follow. So that's part of being called, chosen, and faithful. So let's look at a few verses, starting with some in Revelation 2:10, the message to the church at Smyrna. Be faithful unto death, I will give you the crown of life. That's endurance. That's being an overcomer. Called, chosen. There's that word, faithful. Be faithful unto death. Revelation 12, they did not love their lives to the death. Again, there's that faithful. Being faithful to the death. So as we continue to try to unpack this called, chosen, and faithful, Revelation 12:17, we mentioned this earlier. The dragon goes after the woman, she escapes, and then he went to make war with her offspring, who keep the commandments of God, old covenants, Mount Sinai, Moses, Mosaic covenant, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So the new covenant superseded the old covenant, but it didn't set it aside. It simply is a better covenant. Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill the law and the prophets. And so here, called, chosen, and faithful, keeping the commandments of God and having the testimony of Jesus Christ. Again in Revelation, here is the patience and the faith of the saints as this persecution intensifies. Patient endurance, called, chosen, faithful. We just looked at that. I'm not sure why I have that in there twice. Revelation chapter 16, Jesus interjects as the bowls are being poured out. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments. He keeps his garments from being unspoiled by sin. White garments. And again, called, chosen, and faithful. So a lot of different exhortations in the book of Revelation to be faithful. Now, outside the book of Revelation, Psalm 119, I have inclined my heart. That's a willful decision to lean in. I have inclined my heart to perform your statutes forever to the very end. And I'm not going to do that perfectly, am I? But the key here is that I've inclined my heart. I've set my mind. I've set my heart. I've set my will to do God's statutes forever to the very end. Called, chosen, faithful. Daniel 3:18, the three young men about to be cast into the fiery furnace, and they're saying, our God can save us, but if he doesn't, let it be known to you, O king, we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Daniel chapter 3, here is courage in the face of almost certain death. Those three men didn't know when they went into the furnace that the Son of Man was going to be in there with them, rescuing them. Called, chosen, faithful. Matthew 10:22, you're going to be hated by all for my name's sake, Jesus speaking to his disciples. But he who endures to the end will be saved. There's that perseverance of the saints. Called, chosen, faithful. Mark 8:35, for whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's sake, that person will save his life. In other words, it's going to be a life worth living, a life of significance. If I try to save my life and live it the way I want to, I'm going to spend it frivolously, and it's not going to have anything substantial at the end of the day. But whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's will save it. Jesus speaking in Mark chapter 8. That's called, that's chosen, and that's faithful. 1 Corinthians 4:2, moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful again. So lots of references. I didn't have to look too hard, and these are just, maybe a dozen out of hundreds. Revelation 1:5, telling us who Jesus is. 3 things about Jesus that he is, and then 3 things that he does. He is, number 1, the faithful witness. He faithfully represented God the Father to those of us here on earth. He is the firstborn from the dead, the first to be resurrected from the dead, and the only one to be resurrected from the dead, never to die again. And the ruler over the kings of the earth. And that, of course, we've seen that he is the King of Kings, and he is the Lord of Lords. And he is going to destroy those who destroy the earth. He's going to destroy those who come against him in battle. And then the 3 things that he's done for us. To him who loved us, number 1, washed us from our sins in his own blood. number 2, and then number 3, made us kings and priests to his God and Father. So here we have Jesus showing us how to be faithful, how to be a faithful witness, how to have the testimony that endures to the end. And he indeed endured to the end, didn't he? To him who loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood, all the way to a death on the cross, Jesus was faithful. So back to the text. We've got this woman. First she sits on many waters. We're about to find out what that is right here. And then she sat on the beast. And then she sat on 7 hills, which were 7 kings. We talked about those briefly. So this woman represents the one world religion that the Antichrist, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, uses to consolidate his power. Then he said to me, he the angel, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And so she's controlling them. Sitting on the beast means she's for a time telling the Antichrist what to do, so she's powerful, but her power is limited and her time is limited. Those 10 horns on the beast, remember those 10 kings? They had not received a kingdom, but they did receive authority and reign with the beast for a time, for an hour. Those 10 kings, those 10 horns, they're going to hate the harlot. Let's go to the next slide. They're going to make her desolate. They're going to make her naked. They're going to eat her flesh and burn her with fire. That's pretty much a complete dismantling of that woman and that false religious system, that worldwide religion. The Antichrist is going to so completely destroy it and strip it that it's as if it was naked and burned in the fire. And he'll take all her wealth too. She's very wealthy, if you remember right from the outset. And notice that that line, for God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose. Did God put that evil in their hearts? I think it's a spiritual principle. I call it the hardening principle that God put in place. And the more someone says no to God when they hear either his word or his commands, the harder their hearts get. And these hearts of the 10 kings are extremely wicked. And so they are looking to curry favor with the Antichrist, and they give their authority to the Antichrist. And here it says that through their wickedness, through their pursuit of evil, what it's going to bring them to do is to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. In John's day, of course, that was Rome. Here it's called Babylon, just because Babylon in Genesis chapter 11 was the first city to rebel against the Lord. And so that woman riding the beast now is Rome, or in the words of Revelation, Babylon. So those 10 kings are going to hate the harlot, make her desolate, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So the harlot comes to a ignominious end, a very violent end, and the beast at that point, I think this is the midpoint of the tribulation, this would be when he sets up the abomination of desolation and demands worship as a god. So here's the woman sitting on the beast. There's another rendition of that same woman enjoying her brief time as being in command of the beast with the 7 heads, 7 kings, 7 hills. So this woman is quite powerful. And that great city is the phrase that takes us from ecumenical Babylon to commercial Babylon. And we'll see that in the next chapter. The 10 horns, which are 10 kings, remember, will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and then burn her with fire. Her destiny is one of destination and a horrible death. So here's the picture of that great city. Let's call it Babylon now. And this is what it looks like. It's looking pretty good. As we transition out of chapter 17 into chapter 18, we discover that this city is going to come down rather quickly, just like the false religious system. The woman riding the beast in chapter 17 came down. So what did we have? We had a woman riding a beast who enjoyed power for a time. She seduced the people of the earth. They all came in under this one world religion and practiced that religion to the advantage of the Antichrist. And when it was time, he dismantled that religion, pillaged it, removed all of its wealth, and then destroyed it, probably killing the priests and the leaders of that particular religion. So the religious system is gone. The economic system is still, for a moment, intact, and that's what we'll look at when we get to chapter 18.